because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is yet one more of many movie podcasts. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we are talking about David Cronenberg's 1979 film, The Brood.
David Cronenberg's The Brood.
Are you ready for me, Frank? I seem to be a very special person now. I'm in the middle of a strange adventure.
I want to go with you wherever you go.
Do you?
Yes.
Then look!
The Brood.
We're very delighted to be joined today by a writer and executive producer of the breakout Zoom horror hit Host. Welcome, Jed Shepherd.
Hello, thank you for having me. Really pleased to be asked to talk about this film.
Yeah, we're really excited. But before we actually get into it, we wanted to hype up Host a little bit, partly because it's a movie that we've quite enjoyed in lockdown. And I'll just say one thing to our audience, of which I'm not sure how many will have seen Host. So the pitch for Host is that it's a horror movie. It's set on Zoom, where a group of friends got together and are conducting a remote seance that goes awry when an evil spirit is awakened.
Have you ever done anything like this before?
I've never done this over Zoom. Obviously, we're not physically together, but there's no reason why spirit can't communicate over the internet.
Nothing's gonna happen.
Visualize us sitting in a circle. Spirit, we invite you to use us to pass on any communication. Is there anyone there? Please come forward.
What was that? Amy, was that you?
I heard it.
I heard something. I think there's something here. Do you see that?
There's so much about this movie that is, of course, of the time, and but you guys also do a fantastic job of weaponizing Zoom being the format here to generate some very convincing scares. And what were like some of the inspirations that you had for Host?
Yeah, well, I wrote it, co-wrote it, and exec produced it. The director, who's also the co-writer and co-exec producer, is Rob Savage, and myself and him have made a bunch of short films together first over the last 5-6 years, and we were kind of honing our craft. People kind of knew us on the short film kind of circuit, which isn't big, to be honest, especially in the UK, and people were just waiting for us to do something a little bit bigger. And then in the lockdown, we decided to kind of grasp the opportunity and make something. But it kind of all started from us being bored in lockdown. The UK lockdown, the first one anyway, started in March 2020, and we'd been doing that for about 6 weeks. I set up a WhatsApp group called the Quarantine Movie Club with myself and a bunch of friends, mostly film kind of related people, all in this one group, people we've made shorts with before. And we'd been watching movies every day on Netflix Party, and we'd been doing Zoom quizzes. And it's kind of the first time we all use Zoom. I know it's been around for a couple of years, few years at least, but no one had really used Zoom before. And then Rob just called me up one day and said he wanted to prank our friends. So I don't know if you saw the prank video. I'm not sure. Is it on the behind the scenes? On the,
you know
on the
what?
They show a quick snippet.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It's online. It's online somewhere. But essentially, it's he wanted to scare our friends by pretending there was someone living in his attic who would, and we organically persuaded him to go up. It was myself and Rob's girlfriend who were in on the prank. Everyone else wasn't. And you'll see in that prank video, which is 2 minutes long, everyone from that Zoom is in host. Well, most people,
Oh, that's
all of the
funny.
girls. So they're genuinely are real friends. He goes up to his attic. Something jumps out at him. He falls down and he dies, and that's it. And we recorded it and we put that Zoom call on Twitter, and it got like 17 million views in the space of a couple of days. And that's when people came calling for more. So Rob said there was interest. He called me and said, "Do you have any ideas?" I came up with Zoom Seance, and then that was it. We pitched that to Shudder, and Shudder wanted to make it and gave us the money. And then we had to kind of get the team together, and the team's made up of the crew within that WhatsApp group. So the cast and crew are from that WhatsApp group almost entirely.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
so we're very, very lucky. But it's also the one time in history where everyone's available at the same time.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing with this pandemic that is kind of wild, is that it's like created this sort of level playing field in a certain sense where people are stuck at home, and everyone is stuck at home, and everyone is using Zoom or whatever equivalent, Microsoft Teams or whatever. And so what I thought was so, I mean, obviously, you guys knew this, that you wanted to tap into this with making a movie on Zoom, but it implicates the audience in an interesting way, because the audience is presumably, many of them, watching it on the very piece of equipment, laptop, phone, whatever, that they Zoom for their work calls every day.
Yeah.
So there's this element where they are, you don't even have to set up anything else. It's just like, you know what Zoom is. You're watching this on a laptop, just like these girls are doing their Zoom seance. And so you become, you're brought into it so easily. And then the other thing that's amazing about it is the efficiency with which you guys set up the plot. And of course, that's, I think, brought out by the fact that the women are all friends. And so, you just feel like you're kind of interloping into this friend group who's having just a regular chat on any given day that they would be having, which is a great setting for horror.
That's the only way we could do it, and do it so quick as well. Like, get in and out in 56 minutes. It's so authentic, the friendships between these girls, because they really are friends. They've had similar conversations before. We Zoom all the time. We actually did a real Zoom seance. I think that's in the behind the scenes.
That is in the behind the scenes, yeah.
Yeah, we did that beforehand. And actually, we did probably 3 Zoom seances beforehand in order to kind of get the gist of what happens in one. But yeah, it's crazy that it blown up so much, and none of us kind of predicted what it would become. We thought it would just disappear into thin air, and nobody would watch it. But it's been quite the opposite.
Totally, yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think another aspect of it that's very effective is that the Zoom frame, which we're talking on Zoom right now, and it presents a kind of interesting lens through which to see a movie. Partly because it's narrow. So there's the narrowness to the frame where you're really framing just usually a person sort of 2/3 up or something like that. And so you don't have very much peripheral vision. So you're always worried something's going to jump in from out of frame. That's like a constant fear. The other thing that's interesting is when you are on Zoom, it's this incredibly intimate thing where you're often very close to the computer, and the lights might be off or whatever, and you're watching the screen. But everyone who's on the call with you can see what's behind you, but you aren't as well aware of what's behind you because you're kind of like locked, you're zoomed in, so to speak. So it creates this thing which is really effective in horror movies, where you have, as an audience, more than the characters in the story know, and that can like create this compound, this dread and fear that I think you guys use really effectively in the movie. So
yeah, the every shot's composed quite specifically. Rob is he's proved on our short films, he's basically a bit of a genius when it comes to things like that. And I always think that the empty doorways in horror movies, especially in classic horror movies, are really important, because your imagination can fill that doorway with anything. And if, for instance, you see something in that doorway, like if we had like a someone in a monster suit, for instance, that's something that in your mind you can fight or run away from. But if there's nothing there and there's a constant of nothing there, your mind fills the gap, and your imagination is bigger than our budget, basically. So for horror movies, especially low budget horror movies, like that is really important.
Yeah, there's so many moments in the movie where I was just like leaning forward, trying so hard to see if there is something. You know, a lot of dark doorways, a lot of hallways, or an array of many screens, and I'm like, something's happening in one of these screens. I have to find. You know, I'm like just really, really intently looking. And not sure what I'm seeing even at some point.
That's why it's so rewatchable. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like watching 5 movies at once, because 6 movies at some points, because there is stuff going on all the time behind the girls, and the more you watch it, the more stuff you see, and that's very intentional as well. And also because we thought nobody would watch this, we're playing around quite a lot, so we've got lots of references in there, we've got lots of things in the background. Lots of in jokes that no one will really understand, but yeah, it's very playful, and it does the thing where it marries classic and modern. So the classic trope of a seance in a film, a very classic, kind of been around for 150 years or whatever, and then we marry it with new technology, and that's what we kind of try and do, myself and Rob.
It's wonderful. Everyone should watch Host. And I think maybe at this point we should transition to The Brood, the David Cronenberg film. So here's one. I just want to say a couple things about The Brood, and then I think we should also do our spoiler-free pitch for The Brood, because I'm not 100% sure how many of our audience will have seen The Brood either, and they might be wondering, should I watch The Brood or not? And so, first of all, so The Brood is directed by David Cronenberg. It's 1979. Stars Oliver Reed as Dr. Hal Raglan, director of the Soma-Free Institute of Psychoplasmics, which is, I think, one of the coolest named institutes of all time. Samantha Eggar as Nola Carveth, and Art Hindle as Frank Carveth. So I'm curious, and maybe I'll start with Laura on this. What would be your spoiler-free pitch for The Brood? Maybe like 1 sentence, 2 sentence pitch.
Okay, this one has a semicolon. I'm going to call it 1 sentence.
Okay.
Diminutive murderers with yolk sacks on the loose with snow globes. Also, an empathetic view into the life of a family struggling with the shadow of mental illness.
Okay, I like that. Jed, do you have a pitch for The Brood?
Yeah, but spoiler free is really hard because there's a lot of things.
I know. I was wondering even if mine is spoiler free.
Yeah. Well, I kind of just want to talk about the way that Cronenberg thought of it, which was like an anti-Kramer versus Kramer movie. That's the kind of the best spoiler free way to describe it I can think of.
Kramer versus Kramer, but more realistic is what he said. And it's
exactly
like a completely ridiculous.
His mind is so twisted.
Yeah.
But it's funny just about that. Well, he said that it was his response to Kramer versus Kramer, but Kramer versus Kramer came out after The Brood, so I think he's only saying that in hindsight.
I think, yeah. So he had. I mean, it is a divorce film, so that's, I think, one way of thinking through the movie, and but there is an element of body horror. So for people who are interested in both divorce and body horror, this is your movie. I think that's how I would pitch it. Yeah. So as we're going to get into the movie, one of the things that I think is, I mentioned body horror, and by the way, now we're going to be moving into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, feel free to pause. Anyway, but one of the things about Cronenberg in general, and this movie in particular, is he has this fascination with body horror. And one of the things that I'm interested in, as just an open-ended question, is like, what makes something bodily horrific in particular? So there's something specific to it, and it seems to be like an interesting combination of disgust and nausea tinged with this unnatural unreality. So one thing that I was thinking about when I was watching this movie, and then just think about body horror in particular, is I have had an experience where, as a child, I think a lot of these experiences come from our childhood, in part because it's a time when you need to be suitably mature enough to have the ability to form conscious memories, but you're still too young to have a full conceptual repertoire. So you're still encountering the world afresh and anew in a kind of daily basis or near daily basis. So when you're a child, oftentimes you'll encounter something which you'll remember as an adult, and you'll be like, oh, I knew what that was. But as a child, you didn't know what it was, and it was deeply unsettling and scary. And I wonder if something like this is at the root of body horror. So I'll give you an example. So I, when I was way too young, I watched the first Terminator movie. And there's a part in the first Terminator movie when Arnold has been in a car wreck or something and his eyebrows have been singed off. And he's sort of waxy looking and he's got no eyebrows and he's driving around. And I just remember it's a combination of that, his robotic nature, and also like the acting and so on, but then also the film stock. There's something about the three things there that like combine to form this deeply unsettling feeling in me that I've never really shaken. And I love Terminator. I go back and watch it all the time, but it's one of these things that when I think back on the experience of my watching that as a child, I have this distinct emotional reaction to that is almost like it's a nausea reaction. And I can't quite explain it anyway else. But I was wondering if you guys, if that resonates, what I'm suggesting here resonates with you as a potential explanation for, what is horrific in the body.
Yeah. Well, I think that experience that you had there is to do with a few things. But one of the things I think is the tangibility of the media you watched it in, like the fact that it was shot on film. There's something tangible about film. And like I first watched Terminator on a VHS, and the connection you have with the film when you're physically handling it, and it's the connection you have with you're putting it into the VCR, you're making it happen, you're pressing play, you're in control of the action. That's something really tangible, and it automatically transports you into this film almost, which you don't get with just like streaming with Netflix or something. So I'm a big fan of VHS, and I've got The Brood on VHS, for instance. And the tangibility and the connection that you have with physical media makes the film more horrific almost, because you have that physical proximity to it. And for something like body horror, it'll affect you a little bit more, because the transformation that these people are going through in Cronenberg films, you feel like just the transference of that could happen to you, because you've touched it. You can catch whatever they've got.
That's interesting.
I love that. Yeah, because when you were talking about VHSs, I immediately had a bunch of sense memories that came back to me. The smell of VHS, right? They've got that plastic tape smell to them. The sound if you shake it. Or the clamshell Disney, like I just got like a wave of sense memory when you mentioned VHS. And that must be right, that like the memory of the movie, of the film, the story connected to all those sense memories that you don't get when you're just pushing, when you're just clicking through your Apple TV or your computer in the same way.
Yeah, on tangibility too. I mean, part of, as I mentioned, the film stock with Terminator, and I don't know what stock they used, but it was a classic stock that was used, I think, throughout the 80s. Another movie that has that same kind of vibe, and it's also the lighting too, I think, but is Manhunter. Another movie that I just feel like it's something about when you overlight a certain type of film stock and you get this kind of diffusion of light. I find that just like deeply unsettling. There's scenes in Manhunter, I believe, where what's his name, who plays Lecter, is in his cell or whatever, and it's just way overlit. It's just way too bright, and I find that so unnerving. Or they'll have scenes where they're doing just procedural stuff in the police room and the lighting is just way too harsh. But somehow that harshness, if it was digital, no one would light that, by the way, in digital, right? Because it's just too harsh. It's too sharp. It's too cutting. But on film, somehow it diffuses it because it's softer and so there's a kind of, but I always associate that film stock with like, it's actually the stock itself is horrifying to me. Like when I see movies that are on whatever kind of 80s stock, it's fuzzier. I have a reaction to it. So I love what you're saying about just the physical media being a really important component of this.
Yeah. I mean, that's why a lot of the classic horror films that people still watch now are like from the 70s and 80s. And films that are a little bit more recent are not considered classics because they seem a little bit more throwaway and a little bit more and I think it is to do with the tangibility of how we watch it, and the experience of being so close to the film, and the physical proximity of being close to the film, and the distance that we have from it now. It just feels like there's so much content coming out. It's just chewing gum. It's just nothing to us.
Yeah, it is harder now.
Oh, I was just going to have I was going to bring it back to body horror real quick.
Yeah, that's where I was going. No, that's where I was going.
Oh, that's where you were going. Okay. Well, I was thinking about the question of like what is horrifying about body horror.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that Cronenberg in this movie in particular is exploring too is the mind body connection and separation in us, and the contradiction of being a person. And my friend jokingly refers to her body as her meat sack.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's just the locus of disease.
Yeah,
basically.
right. It's just rotting away as we live in it.
Yeah.
And we don't want to, like, we don't see ourselves as that oftentimes, right? We have this interiority, and it's sometimes it's a contradiction to be in a meat sack and also have your interior life. And when your body it sort of rebels against you, if it gets sick, if it gets hurt, that's a kind of hard realization to come to, I think, for us as human beings who spend so much time and focused on our interior mind. And we're animals too, and we don't, but like we're carnivores, but we don't think about it that way. We have our meat come to us in very neatly packaged, sanitized ways. So when we see something like what our organs look like inside, or see an animal tearing into another animal, which isn't very far away from what we do, it feels like very upsetting, because I think we don't really like to recognize that part of our existence.
Yeah, it's almost like humanity, we're trying to transcend our own animality. And this is like a stark reminder that we are animals.
Yeah. I mean, this is the reveal, right? That she's birthing these vengeful creatures, little children. She has her outside uterus and she rips it open with her teeth and licks it like a cat. Cats do that. They bite the cord off and then bathe them. It's something that other animals do, and it looks horrifying when a woman does it.
It's very non-natural.
Some women eat the placenta after birth, and
it was offered to us, and we chose not to.
The midwife was like, "Do you want to see your placenta?" And I was like, "Not really."
I took a photo of it though, so Jed, if you want to see it, we've got it.
Please do. I'm making my avatar.
Could be your background.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think the kind of we're conditioned to think that beauty is good. And anything else that isn't is bad. So to see the transformation of a human body into something that's considered not beautiful is horrifying to us, and we automatically think it's bad. Maybe it's good. Maybe what's happening to her is good. She's producing more life, and isn't life good? So it depends on the perspective. But I think with Cronenberg and his stuff, he is obviously, the body horror is almost like a metaphor for humanity, and yeah, I mean, it is just gross as well. There's that level of it, that it's just gross, and it's a horror movie. Because like, I mean, I've seen The Brood a number of times, but I'm always like repulsed, as Nola says, like I disgust you. Of course you do. You're disgusting. It's disgusting what's happening to her.
Oh God, Nola.
No, I disgust you. I sicken you. You hate me. You didn't come here because you love me. You came here to take our daughter away and give her to somebody else.
But the thing is, like, all she's doing is showing you what's happening usually on the inside.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So it's strange. It makes you question your own judgment. Like, why is this so disgusting?
Yeah.
She's just given birth. She's just essentially given birth, but with the baby on the outside.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Although the whole thing is, I mean, when I was pregnant, I used to text my sister facts, and she'd be like, "This whole process is disgusting." Like, did you know that at one point a fetus is covered in fine hair called luonga? Like, you have like a little hair baby inside of you at some point.
Wow.
The whole thing is wild. Yeah. I'm sorry. Justin's going to cut all that.
No, it stays in. But I like this idea. I mean, as you're pointing out, Jed, there's a lot of this is about an externalization of this internal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're pointing out, Laura, the this idea of we can transcend our animality and become these sort of bodiless beings is this myth that we are constantly reminded of when we have when we have an ailment in our body. And one of the
when there's a global pandemic.
or when there's a global pandemic, exactly.
Yeah.
Or when you see it on the screen, when you see someone who's got something growing out of their neck or something growing out of their side or whatever, you are reminded of that you cannot actually transcend your body. It's inextricably linked to what kind of thing you are. And confronting that is horrifying in a way. It's horrifying because you thought, no, we are these rational beings that like we can sit around and like think of amazing things. I'm a philosopher. I just sit around and think of stuff all day, and I try to get out of my body. The whole thing is about being inside of the mind, and then to be reminded that like, in fact, actually, not only are these two things connected, but that, you have to live in your body and so on. Bringing that back down is, I think, deeply unsettling. I mean, not to mention also that a big part of this movie is that it's a psychotherapeutic institute. So they're trying to exercise these mental things, these traumas from, earlier in their life and maybe even cross-generationally by externalizing them physically. And that is, I mean, I don't know if that's in itself particularly horrifying. Of course, they have very externalizing consequences, but just externalizing does feel like it is something we do, right? Like we're told to yell, to externalize emotions and things like that. Or, the one of the quotes is,
"You see, these things tend to express themselves in one way or another. I've seen 5-year-olds like your daughter with ulcers as bad as any middle-aged businessman." And
also it was, if you remember when the grandmother was speaking about Nola when she was little, like this isn't because of the psychoplasmic kind of therapy. Like stuff was going on when she was a kid as well. She was getting sores and hives on her body. Nobody knew why. She went to doctors. They couldn't figure out why. So it was kind of something that was innate in her the entire time. It was always going to happen, and this was just kind of like increased the potency of it, I guess.
Right. Well, and I mean, just to jump to the ending, I mean, which I think is one of the bleakest endings of a movie, partly because at the end we see Candy, the young girl who Frank has been struggling to sort of protect from Nola the entire movie. You see her arm. The final shot is the close-up of her arm, and she's developing a kind of the physical manifestation of the trauma that she's been undergoing, these sores on her arm. And you realize, like, despite his best efforts, the process continues afresh, which is just, I don't know, very pessimistic.
It's a bummer.
It is. Well, the interesting thing about this entire film for me is it's about motherhood, but there is not a single scene where you see Nola with her daughter. Not once. It's crazy. And I just think that's obviously intentional because they wanted to kind of show that disconnect between mother and daughter. And it's only in that final scene you see that she shares something with her mother, this potential illness, which it goes undescribed. It's never explained what this actually is and why it's happening.
Yeah. Did you? So as a mother, Laura,
yes.
what would you say?
No, I'm the token mother.
Yeah.
I've already invoked my pregnancy and my birth. So yes.
Well, I mean, it's a movie about childbirth. And I mean, so I figured it was going to come up.
What was the question?
I don't know. I mean,
I was just being sassy.
I mean, what do you think about the relationship between Candy and Nola? That the fact that it's not shown, there's just never any point where they're shown together on screen.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what I think about that, except for that I was noting to you earlier that I felt like this movie was a gender flip in terms of like what we usually see of stories of single mothers. And this felt to me like he's a single dad trying to keep it all together. And we don't usually see that. I was also struck by the part where he doesn't want to bring Candy to Soma Free anymore because he thinks that she's abusing Candy. And he's told by the lawyers basically like, you're screwed. All of the law is basically stacked against you.
Yeah, the
here.
law
respects motherhood.
Motherhood, right.
Specifically. And that seems crazy, right? If he's got these like pictures of welts on her back that he has to, build a stronger case for being able to be with his daughter and this, perhaps abusive mother has more of a claim than he does. So it did make me think about this is, and that's not something that you see very often, a man with the law stacked against him. But it made me think about how like culture thinks about women, and that we respect motherhood. We privilege the mother over the father in familial relationships and nuclear relationships. But maybe not so as much when we think about reproductive rights. In that case, like the woman is sort of treated as like a shell,
right? Yeah.
Or the vehicle,
the oven, right?
Exactly. So, and her personhood is not privileged there. So I thought a lot about the fact that I don't usually see these kinds of stories told from the man's perspective, and everything all the balls he's trying to keep in the air, you know, trying to keep his job. He's trying to, which is like he's falling behind in his architectural plan. He's trying to, you know, basically not raise any red flags for Candy's school. He's trying to like make sure Candy already has daycare, while he's also, you know, trying to build a case against his wife so that she's not further abused. And then he's got his drunk father-in-law calling him too in the middle of the night. He's got a lot going on. I mean, I really liked that it was kind of a gender flip from usually like a single mother story that I often see.
God damn it, Psychoplasmics is a ripoff. It's a sideshow. I've seen it in action.
Frank, it doesn't matter what you think. Now you listen to me. You call up this Raglan, and you be a real mensch with him. Otherwise, it's just a matter of time before the cops show up at your door and you lose your kid for good. The law believes in motherhood.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I think that this film didn't kind of reach the same audiences as, I don't know, another kind of genre film. Just because, like, in the biggest horror films ever made, it's always a female who's the lead, and that kind of trick has worked every time. And the reason, like, is because guys seem to empathize with women in horror films more than they do with guys, because guys are meant to be seen as strength. And I think it worked to its disadvantage in this film, even though, like, I do really, really love this film. The fact throughout the entire thing, Frank, who's the lead, he doesn't show that much emotion. Like, there are crazy things happening. He's just watched his mother-in-law die. His face is blank. Even when he sees his ex-wife reveal that she's kind of grotesque, he maybe his eyebrow flickers for a second. But it's just like, okay, yeah, so he's playing the strong man, and like maybe there's some men out there that kind of can get into that, but you're not seeing the range of emotions you would have if it was kind of gender flipped. If it was a woman in the lead, you would see that emotion, and that's what horror films work on. You kind of need to see that emotion in order to know what to feel, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, you do see. I mean, Candy is interesting. So the daughter is experiencing this to a certain extent, but she also doesn't have that much of an emotional response, because she sort of responds by shutting down. She goes into these like listless extended sleeps. That's her reaction.
But I think that is more effective than watching Frank be unemotional.
Because she's helpless.
She's helpless, but also we're sort of we're used to seeing children respond in a certain way. We're expecting her to scream and be, respond in the same way. In the scene where the school teacher dies, all the kids are just howling in the background. Like, that's what we expect out of children. And for her to just have that blank stare is more disturbing, I think, based on what we're looking at.
I see. Wow. Yeah.
But he does make that thing, like that comment where, she married me for my sanity, hoping that would rub off. Maybe too,
Good
like
line.
He doesn't have much of an interiority himself. Like, he might be kind of a simple guy, and there's not a lot going on up here. She's got too much going on up here, but he doesn't have, much at all. It might be
nothing affects him. Like, I would be just the first murder. I'd be like, I would go on holiday or something, like take that kid with me. He just stays in the situation and just is content to kind of let this play out, this crazy series of events. Just let it play out, and it's almost his own fault. Like, and also, like, if he knew that his ex-wife was potentially hurting his daughter, why not just go away, take the daughter away? Why keep her in the situation? It's unusual.
Yeah. I mean, I think they do try to explain that away with the legal stuff, like
he's
that
worried,
he could potentially lose his daughter forever by taking her away. But But yes, I agree with you. I think that's true with so many horror movies, right? You're always just like, why don't they just run out of the haunted house? Get out, man.
Yeah, we recently, I had never seen The Conjuring, so we watched it recently. And before I was ever a homeowner, I always had that thought. I was always like, oh yeah, if you're a haunted house, just get the hell out of there. But as like a homeowner, you're like,
oh my God, they sunk all their equity.
Yeah, you're like, we don't have any money. All our money's tied up in this property. There's no way. And plus, like the fact that there's demons, we're gonna have a hard time selling it. And if we do sell it, we're gonna take a huge loss. I might just try to make my peace with the demons.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but like the Conjuring is to me almost the perfect horror movie. It's so well put together, and I think James Wan is at the moment he's one of the best out there in terms of the anatomy of a scare. He knows exactly how to create a scare and foreshadow it. And in Host, there are some elements that we kind of took from James Wan, and like how to build a scare perfectly. But like, no, I get what you mean with if you were in that horror movie yourself, you would just run away, but sometimes you can't. In Host, for instance, we made sure that they couldn't really run away because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're not allowed to go outside. So that kind of helped. But also when one person, we kind of try to make sure we were in the audience of the mind and thought what they thought. And if I was watching Host, I would think, why don't they just run away? But then we see one of them try and run away and they get pulled back and killed. So
I mean, that is a good moment in Host, though, when she finally, because the pandemic element of them having to be stuck in their bubbles, and Gemma decides to she puts on the mask. She's like, I'm going over there.
No, but I mean, and the elbow bump.
The elbow bump is great.
I laugh every time with the elbow bump, which is nice. It's nice to have that moment of levity, like after you had all these like scares and you're kind of on edge. Can I just make one more defense of like people in horror movies? Because of course, nobody in a horror movie knows they're in a horror movie. They don't know that this is a demon or whatever.
They think it's like a squirrel in the attic.
They're trying to figure it out. Like if demonic stuff started happening here, I would not think first thing, I'm in a horror movie, I got to get the hell out of here. Of course, the people watching it know that. That's the last explanation I'm going to come to after I've eliminated all the other ones. But I was also one other thing about The Conjuring. So I actually also quite love The Conjuring. And I think part of the reason The Conjuring is, I was telling Laura, actually, I was like, we'd watched it and Laura had seen it before. She saw it in theaters and everything. But, and I was like, I want to like rewatch The Conjuring. And Laura's like, really? Like so soon? And I was like, well, I think part of it is that it feels like a warm blanket. And I think part of the reason it feels so warm, and even despite the horrible subject matter, is that every character in the movie, there's no conflict. Like they're all on the same page the whole time. They're all working together, and it's like a family. Like even the family and then this outside family, they all kind of joined the Warrens. I forget all the names, but I mean, they all come together and are working together, and no one's really, I mean, there's moments of skepticism, but it's not really, they don't spend a lot of time like trying to like debunk anything. They're just like, no, they're demons. Let's work. We'll help you. And there's something nice about that. There's something really nice about just, there's a problem. We're going to solve it, and we're here to help. And it's really, I find that comforting.
Yeah, you're right. Because usually horror films are kind of moments of conflict, but there really isn't conflict between the humans anyway.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. Never even thought about it like that. But wow,
because I was thinking, like, compare it to like The Exorcist, where in The Exorcist, the first half of the movie is them all trying to figure out what's going on with Regan, and that is actually, for me, some of the scariest stuff is all the medical tests they do on her, trying to figure out what's happening and so on. And I think that makes it a harsher, more I know, almost like aggressive movie, and it's not one I want to come back and rewatch again and again. Partly for that reason. And there's also all this other just like interpersonal conflict about faith happening there. And that's not like, there's no like crisis of faith in The Conjuring, which is kind of nice. And I think that makes it unlike a lot of horror canon, that is.
So, in real life, the Warrens, they definitely, between the couple, they definitely had different styles. The man, Ed Warren, he was very much gung ho. Monsters are real. We have to kind of fight fire with fire. And Lorraine Warren, she was slightly more skeptical than she is in the Conjuring movies.
I see.
And I think she was more, because obviously they were kind of hucksters. There was an element of like fakery to do with them, because they knew that they were kind of box office. They wrote books about their exploits. They would take advantage of headlines. As soon as there was that Amityville haunting that was covered in newspapers in the 70s or whenever it was, then they went to Amityville way after the fact, and suddenly now Amityville is closely related to the Warrens, and they just did that time again. There was an incident of a man who thought he was a werewolf in London, coincidentally, and way after the fact, they came to London and they kind of like started speaking to this guy, and now that's closely related to them. So, and they wrote about it in their book, which is what all of the Conjuring movies and kind of spin-offs are based on. So there was actually real conflict in real life between the couple.
That's interesting.
Whether something was real, whether this ghost was real, whether this werewolf was real. But yeah, they don't currently have that in the films, which I think they should.
The only conflict really in The Conjuring is whether or not to go further, right? Because Lorraine wants to go forward, and Ed is worried about her. But that's a conflict that's really just one of love, you know? So.
And ultimately, he defers to her because he knows she has, the psychic power and all that, and so. Anyway, okay, this is not a podcast about the Conjuring, but although.
Well, we're here to talk about horror
in general. Here's another aspect of this movie that I find quite horrifying as a parent. When you have a child with someone, your lives are now connected in a very it's inextricable, really.
Yeah,
I think it's hard to.
Sorry, Justin, we're stuck.
Well, I speak from experience.
A little bit of regret here.
Yeah. We use this podcast to work out our marital issue. Did Justin tell you that? Did he warn you that we're going to do this? No.
Yeah, that's the sideline. But yeah, so we, once you have a child with someone, that you're now connected, and. Even once you're divorced, of course, divorced parents, the kid has to shuttle back and forth between them. You're co-parenting. Yeah, exactly. And that child is a link between the two of you. Now, when you learn that your partner in this has some disease, has a mental illness or whatever it is that is affecting Nola, it is maybe so incurable. I mean, we have to imagine that it's taken a lot for Frank and Nola to decide to enroll her in this experimental research program or experimental treatment program. So now they're in a very precarious situation, and I think that's just incredibly terrifying to me, because it's a feeling of being trapped that we really can't get out of. I mean, you're right, you could always run off and so on, but like the law does not look kindly on just taking off. They're going to pursue you, and that's something that Raglan says. Like, he's like, look, I'm fighting for Nola here in this case. It's part of her treatment that she gets to see her daughter.
You have no legal right to deny access.
Anytime you'd like to test the matter in open court, I'd be more than happy to oblige.
For the ultimate good of your own family, Frank. We'd be prepared to do just that. But don't you force it.
That feeling of being trapped, it's just super, I don't know. There's something very terrifying about that. And the other thing about that connects with Cronenberg in general is I think Cronenberg, despite being like known for body horror, he's like Carpenter in a way, like a very social commentary kind of director. And his movies are always like adding these bits of, how society reacts to stuff and how you're just as much trapped or shaped by society in ways that are, lamentable and so on. And so I think this is just another instance of that in his filmography, where you have, part of the horror is that for Frank is that he's being maybe, people around him are being killed off by these little demonic children and so on. But the other horror is that like he can't get his daughter away from this person who's mentally ill and harming her. And that is quite scary to me.
Yeah.
It reflects obviously his real life situation when he was going through a bad divorce and trying to get the kid. And obviously he's projected his issues onto this film, made the mother monstrous, and the man the hero, which I thought was quite funny. It's like how M. Night, he puts himself into his films as the writer that saves the world every single time. It's kind of that vibe. But yeah, I mean, like it's. I guess there's a dual level of horror. There's the horror of something that you put your entire heart into, this relationship, and this kid who's the physical manifestation of your relationship, and the breakdown of that is horrific, because like this relationship represents you as a person for a long time, and this daughter represents you, and the breakdown of this marriage just means you failed. It's just and the child is a constant reminder that you failed. But I think it's quite interesting that the mother is someone who has got mental issues, who's physically transforming into a monster. It makes it almost easy to be on the man's side. Because
right.
Because usually we would side with the mother every time. It's just natural. And he found a way to not side with the mother by making her a monster, which is, I think, very clever for his. I mean, he's obviously the architect of his own story.
Yeah,
so
and then he submitted this in his legal brief for custody, right? He submitted the film as evidence.
Well, so it's funny. We watched. We wanted to watch another Cronenberg, just to get into the headspace. So we watched Rabid right before this.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And as a pairing, they're so similar in a lot of ways. But I think because that movie does center on a woman hero, sort of anti-hero. I mean, she's spreading disease all over
tragic
the city.
Tragic
but
figure.
She's a tragic figure. Yeah, exactly. But I thought I didn't see this movie as. I didn't see, The Brood as misogynist or anti-mother or anti-Nola even, because I had Rabid in my head.
Yeah.
And we have two instances back to back of sort of egotistical male scientist men who are tinkering with women's bodies, with women's minds, and then distancing themselves from the repercussions. And then the women are kind of stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt, yes, when she's screaming like, "I'll kill Candy before I let you have her," that's pretty extreme. She's no good. And when no good, don't do it. And when Frank kills her, you're like, yeah, that's the right choice. Like, what else is left at this point? But until then, I wasn't, I was kind of empathetic to her too, in that she's being toyed with and manipulated, and she's in a tough place, and she's vulnerable, and she's just gotten swept up into this Summer-Free Institute to be really the sort of crown jewel of the institute, right? The queen bee. He's just obsessed with her. And
I mean, it's also her. She's not responsible for the mental illness that she has.
No,
which is, I guess we're supposed to imagine it's because of the trauma and abuse that she suffered at the hands of her parents, who likely themselves suffered abuse. So there's this perpetuation across generations of the trauma that kind of goes down, and again,
and it's always maternal trauma as well.
Yes,
it's always the mum being the one that is doing the physical abuse, and the dad kind of just looks away, but it's really the mother who's actually doing the abuse, which is interesting.
Yes,
interesting take.
No, I'm not, Nola. You're being so unfair, sweetheart. Mummies never do that. Mummies never hurt their own children.
You did hurt me. You beat me and you scratched me. You threw me down the stairs.
Show me what I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting, Cronenberg. I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, no, his biography cannot be ignored in this context. Yeah.
But it's funny, the Oliver Reed's character, obviously, in a normal horror movie, he would be the bad guy, right? The guy who's essentially the head of a cult, where he has followers who just idolize him, call him daddy, call him. Essentially, he's playing a messiah figure, and at the end, he almost comes out as a hero, and he
sacrifices himself.
Yeah, and it's weird, like Jesus, and it's very strange that, because like, I don't know. I felt really weird to me that he would do that, because the whole film was about him with this idea that his psychoplasmic therapy is the way forward, but he's had evidence the entire way that it just creates monsters.
Yeah,
like, basically.
I mean,
and to give him that kind of moment is a bit strange.
My sense is that, so yeah, I think you're right that the movie plays it like almost the entire movie that you're supposed to think he's the bad guy. And then that's almost a twist in the end, that it turns out that the whole time and the way I read it at least, is the whole time he's a guy who really did care about Nola and really did care about the patients that he's trying to help. And probably, I mean, I don't know, I'm reading into this, but probably what happened is so he has this thing that we see, this type of therapy that we see happen when he's interviewing this guy, Mike. And as in this wonderful scene where he's talking to Mike, and progressively as they do shot reverse shot, Mike's developing boils and wounds on his body, and they're sort of, giving away pus and stuff, and it's incredibly gross. And so you get the sense that, okay, this is probably what most of the therapy is like. But with Nola, she's so scarred that like her therapy results in like something he's never seen before, namely like her giving this like externalized womb, and she's giving birth to these creatures. So he's wondering like, what should I do with these creatures? So he's sort of, I get the sense that he like builds this like structure to like this barn like structure to just keep them.
Yeah, like a sauna kind of wooden Swedish outhouse type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all wearing little onesies with footies.
Yeah,
I love that.
He's just, but I get the sense that he probably is just like, I don't know what to do with these kids. So like, what do I do? So like, I'll just kind of keep them here, and he locks the door, right? And he's just hoping to like, it'll figure itself out, right? And then, and it doesn't. But so that's my read, is that he actually all along isn't a bad guy. He realizes that like he has caused. I mean, I think there's a moment actually where he realizes it, where Frank says,
They took her. They killed Ruth Mayer, and then they brought Candace back here.
They killed Ruth Mayer.
and he realizes that these creatures have perpetuated multiple murders, and he's got blood on his hands, basically. And I think it's in that moment when he decides, like, okay, we have to stop this. You know, like this has gone too far. And but I do think that's probably the best we're going to get from Cronenberg, right? Because Cronenberg always has these scientist guys who sort of, you know, they get theirs in the end. You know, they fly too close to the sun and they get burned. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who realizes and tries to atone. So that's maybe like the best we're going to get. I don't know. I'm thinking in particular of like Rabid, the doctor in Rabid who does the experimental skin grafts. He gets bit and that's it for him. He becomes a zombie. And I'm thinking like in The Fly, like Goldblum turns into a fly.
It's true, yeah.
I don't know. They just kind of eat it.
Well, I think like casting Oliver Reed as well is obviously he's an amazing actor, but it's kind of genius because Oliver Reed, he comes with the baggage that people just really like Oliver Reed anyway, and I guess Cronenberg, I believe he comes from a scientific background anyway. Like he wouldn't want the scientists to be too kind of evil, considered evil, because science is essentially good. And it is good to experiment and to kind of like reach the boundaries of human capability. So I just think it's really an interesting twist that you wouldn't get in modern movies. That this scientist who's done all these kind of weird experiments comes out as a hero at the end.
Yeah,
it's I can't think of another instance of it really. Maybe Reanimator.
Yeah, I was going to say Reanimator too. Yeah,
maybe the first one at least. But yeah, there's very few. And again, there's just very few final men in horror movies. There's Evil Dead, and there's this. I can't think of too many other films where the man is the kind of hero.
Last one standing. Yeah. I guess that's right. Yeah. Is there any other aspects of the movie you want to talk about, Jed?
Just that I think this is particularly the gateway Cronenberg. Like, I think this is the easiest Cronenberg, because I mean, if you look at his films, and actually now his son's films, they're kind of inaccessible to the average movie watching person because they're strange. That they don't follow a normal narrative. It's always kind of like a dream logic to the whole thing. But I think this one is the least weird out of all of his films. I think this one is one you could definitely just watch and not know anything about Cronenberg and not even know what body horror is and kind of get it and understand it. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end that's relatively normal for Cronenberg anyway. Because if you compare it to something like Videodrome, it's chalk and cheese. Like, I mean, obviously there's the body horror element, which is the same, but this one just feels like it's a normal story. Like it's just about a guy who wants custody of his kid and will go to any lengths, even murder, to get that.
I agree. I wouldn't have them start with Videodrome, but man, I do like that movie a lot. That movie is so strange, especially like the weird snuff film stuff. It's so strange. It's just, I mean, talk about also like the tactile nature of because there he's using video within film. And so you have these scenes where they're like at the TV station and they're looking at the video feed, and it's got all that kind of fuzziness that you got when you had to like adjust the tracking on the VCR. I
still watch videos. Like I put on a monthly video screen when cinemas are open, a monthly video screening where I project myself, Rob, who directed host, another friend Elaine. We have like the London Video Club, and we link up a VCR to a big cinema screen, and we show people classic horror movies on video, just because a lot of people don't have that memory, or it's been 20 years since they last did it. So, and I want to kind of give the next generation of people, and just people who miss it, the opportunity to watch their favorite movies or their classic horror movies in the format that I think is the best.
Nice.
And it's the more and so we've screened like The Ring, the original Japanese one, which is all about a video cassette. So
that's perfect.
What else we've done? Blair Witch Project, which is perfect on the video as well. And and like as soon as cinemas reopen here, we're gonna do a whole.
So
are
you telling us that you guys are the Christopher Nolan of videos?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Christopher Nolan of VCRs.
Yeah. but yeah, I think you're right. We are like evangelists for that format. But and that's why like Host just came out on VHS as well. Like
really?
Wow. Because I genuinely think it's a really interesting format, and I love getting X rentals as well, where you see all the adverts beforehand as well, because it's like time travel when you're watching that.
Another one that might be fun for that would be Be Kind We Run. I'm just trying to think of other movies that have like video based. But there is this element of like, I'm just trying to. I mean, so I'm curious. So when you project it, is it because what is the actual like?
Ratio.
I don't. Yeah. How does it? Yeah. What's the quality we're looking at here? Is it like 480 or?
No. Well, you'd be surprised. Well, it depends on how old the video is. If it's an original video from cassette from the 80s, it is going to be a little bit kind of grainy. But like for instance, The Ring that came out in like the video came out in 99 2000, relatively good quality, and widescreen as well. Like towards the end of the video's life, everything was released in widescreen. So you do get the early ones that's in 4:3 ratio. So it's like the sides are kind of cut off. But I love that, especially with horror films, because when you have that ratio, you feel a bit like a Zoom call. You feel like really there's a sense of pressure and claustrophobia. And then you get films like the original Japanese Ring, which there's sequences in that are really beautiful, like landscapes and like when she's looking out to sea and on cliff tops. And you're seeing that in widescreen. It's really, really cool. But you're also seeing the grain as well. And you're seeing, like in The Ring, it's all about copying videos. And that's the only way to save yourself. You need to copy a video. And you're physically having to... So when we did The Ring, we got a member of the audience to come out and take the video out of the case, place it into the video themselves, press play. And it's great, especially at the end of that film where you realise like they've passed the curse on to the audience watching it. and the only way you can get out of it is if you copy it and play it for the next person. And that's like what me, Rob, and Elaine did. We passed the film on, we passed the curse on to the audience now, so we're safe. We're not going to get murdered.
Yeah. Yeah, they better quickly arrange a screening for a lot of people.
Exactly.
Or just one person.
There's not too many video screenings and going around.
Are you a Ringu fan or a Gore Verbinski Ring fan, or both?
I think they're both good, but there's nothing better than the original movie. I think there's something scary about it, and I think the fact, because it's Japanese, you have to really concentrate and look at the subtitles. So you're like that the entire time. Where with Gore Verbinski's one, if you're watching it at home at least, you can go and have a coffee. You can have it up in the corner of your screen and work on something at the same time because you're hearing the English. So you concentrate more when it's the Japanese one. I feel, yeah, and also Ringu was one of the first kind of wave of Japanese movies to come over to the West that started the kind of extreme Asia wave. And I mean, I guess Takeshi Kitano had a few really big Japanese movies, but yeah, so there wasn't really a precedent for like teenagers that for Japanese films, so it felt a bit more like a snuff movie almost. Like, this could be real because I've not seen anything like this before. Like, and I remember, I mean, I was a kid, but when I first watched it, like, I was scared of that videotape. I was just like, oh my God. And I would lend it to my friends and they would give it back to me and like, oh my God, what have you shown me? This is scary.
About like horror coming from other cultures that you're less familiar with, it does add a different element to the experience. And it is that disillusion of the like cultural stuff is I think really, really intriguing. Like, we rewatched Houseu recently, and I don't know, a year or two ago, actually, now that I think about it. It was actually not in the pandemic, so now I can date it. So it was a couple years ago because we had a friend over. So and we, and that's a movie where, it has all these comical elements and all that, but this extreme cultural disconnect is almost like, it is almost like what I was saying about body horror. It's like, it's so it's like fascinating, but it's so unnerving and unnatural that you're not quite sure what you're watching at any given point. The genre is like unlike anything you've ever seen, and that is kind of horrifying just in and of itself.
Yeah, what's the Itchy Killer? What's that movie?
Oh yeah, we watched Itchy the Killer.
Itchy the Killer.
Recently,
yeah, thank you. That was another one where I was like, "Whoa, it's like a whole subculture that that I've never seen before."
So you need to watch Guinea Pig 6.
Okay,
which is Guinea Pig 6. Mermaid in the Sewer. It's about a guy who...
What a title.
Yeah, it's about a guy whose wife dies from an illness, and he's like a painter, and he kind of wants to distract himself from the death. So he wanders around, and he wanders into the sewer, and he finds a mermaid there, who's a beautiful mermaid. He takes her out of the sewer, essentially saves her, brings her into his apartment, and even though she's alive, she starts to physically transform it and rot. And he uses her kind of weeping pus to paint her. And she's like, paint me. And she's just in the bath, like slowly rotting away. And like he's painting her, and it is weird and gross, but out of the guinea pig like movies, that's the only one that I think is actually really. The others are kind of like gross for no reason, but that is actually kind of beautiful in some kind of way.
Wait, so can I clarify something, Jed? So you said Guinea Pig 6, so this is the 6th of a franchise of guinea pig movies?
Yeah. So you should do a whole podcast on the guinea pig franchise. They're mostly disgusting and horrible, almost torture porn movies. But for some reason, Guinea Pig 6, they just switch flicked and just like, we'll make a really cool movie. It kind of looks like a TV movie, to be quite honest. The budget wasn't high, but it's so interesting. And just how it was filmed, it feels like a documentary. And it's not torture porn. It's almost beautiful. There's obviously scary bits because there's this woman rotting in the bathtub.
Yeah,
who manages to, and there's pus like going everywhere. but he's trying to make something beautiful out of the situation. And it also parallels the fact that his wife died from cancer, and he's kind of seen this happen, and it's really interesting. It's on YouTube, like you can find it, and that's one of the few places you can find it. It's really hard to track down, but
all right, consider it added to the watch list.
My gosh,
Guinea Pig 6, and you don't have to have seen 1 through 5 to know what's going on.
No, they're all separate movies. They're all separate movies.
Got it. I like that when like you can jump in, or like when a franchise gets sort of strange or takes a complete left turn in like the 5th or 6th series. I feel like the Saw movies are all within the same universe, but like I don't know if it's Saw 4 where they start really doing some crazy things narrative wise. the time tricks that they're doing. I was like, this is pretty creative.
Yeah.
Have you seen the House movies? Like, I know House is House as well, but the series of 80s and 90s movies, the American one called House.
No, I don't know.
It's really, 'cause every film they change tone. Like the first one is comedy horror, second one is pure comedy, and the third one they decided to go just a straight up like horror film, a little bit like Nightmare on Elm Street. And I watched the third one yesterday. I've seen it before, but I watched it again yesterday, and it is such a weird movie. I think in the first 5 minutes there are 6 beheadings. It's crazy. It is really weird.
Do you have a favorite subgenre within horror?
I'm not that big of a fan of zombie movies. Obviously there are some classics, but I think it's been overdone quite a lot. I think my favorite, I'm just basing this on kind of my favorite movies of all time, probably comedy horror. If they get it right, it's the perfect type of movie for me. And like Evil Dead 2, I think is the best balance of that, because it has the horror elements of Evil Dead, but it's not as slapsticky as Army of Darkness. It's the perfect kind of balance. And then my actual favorite movie of all time was a film called Night of the Comet, which was a 1984 kind of sci-fi horror about these 2 valley girls, these sisters, who survive the end of the world, really, and they are in LA. They're in LA, and they have to survive. Basically, they're kind of zombies that are after them. These scientists that are after them, and they mostly spend the film looting malls, dancing around to girls just want to have fun, and firing guns at like empty cars and stuff. It's a really cool movie. Hopefully one day I'll get involved with the remake of it if it ever happens.
Oh, there you go. Yes, consider the territory been claimed. Amazing. Do you have Laura? Do you have a favorite? Because Laura's a big horror fan. Do you have a favorite like subgenre of horror?
What were you gonna say?
Can I guess? Sometimes I try to guess actually when I do.
Go for it.
So I'm gonna guess some kind of like serial killer or psychological horror.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although I do like a good haunted house movie too.
Nice.
Oh, Silence of the Lambs. Yes, I love Silence of the Lambs. Yeah.
Yeah, big fans of the lambs in this house, but also Shining. So that's the kind of the two. Yeah. I guess those are the 2 pillars for you.
Yeah, and like the movie, I have like a really soft place in my heart for Copycat. I don't know that many people do anymore, but I do.
It's way ahead of its time, actually. I think Copycat, great movie.
Yeah, but that's definitely right in Laura's, Venn diagram.
All right, we'll put that on the list. All right, to bring it back around as we wrap up here for some of our favorite scenes or lines from the movie here, I'll just kick it off here with one. This is a line from Nola's mother, Juliana Kelly. She says,
30 seconds after you're born, you have a past. And 60 seconds after that, you start to lie to yourself about it.
And I find that actually kind of like, and there are a number of quotes that almost sum up the background theory that is informing this film. But that's one of them, which is that like, you're born and then you begin to like repress. And then you just have all these things happen to you that are repressed and shoved down deep down inside. And then, you meet, maybe that repression manifests itself in physical harm. And you need to go and hang out with Dr. Raglan and get it out. But I like that. I just think there's a number of quotes where he really just distills the point of the movie. I don't know. What about you guys? Jed, do you have a favorite line?
Well, it's the one that you mentioned earlier, I think, which is when Frank says,
Now, sometimes when I'm being easy on myself, I say, well, it's not your fault. You got taken in. You got involved with a woman who married you for your sanity, hoping it would rub off.
brilliant mic drop moment. But like that's probably my favorite quote. But my favorite scene in the whole thing is probably the whole school sequence where it's a room full of kids watching. Real kids watching a woman get bashed to death with hammers or mallets, and it's like it's really hard. And I was trying to figure out how did they do this without scarring the kids for life. And they just did it. They just did it.
They just scarred some kids.
And because
then they sent them to the Summer Free Institute. So
they got free admission.
Well, I watched an interview with the actress that played the main little kid. And she said that she had to really do a dual job on that set that day. She had to act in it, but she also had to calm down the other kids who were possibly not as mentally strong as her and who were horrified with what was going on. And I was trying to think, if I was a kid and I was told by a film crew just to stand there and watch this teacher be bashed to death, there'll be blood all over the floor. I'm not sure how I would. I probably would have enjoyed it and told my friends how cool it was. But like, I think that could be quite scarring.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I was thinking a very similar thing actually, and it is remarkable because I was wondering it's almost like Cronenberg is teasing you because he shows you some wide shots with the kids kind of showing up. You get the cut to the mallet and so on, and then maybe you're thinking. Then they kind of cut a little closer thinking, okay, the damage is all going to get done in close-ups so that you're never going to see the other kids watching it. And then he cuts back to the wide and he's like, yeah, no, these kids are just going to be bashing the teacher's head in. And you're sort of thinking like, okay, yeah, right. So you were kind of teasing me that you were going to do this in a kind of ethically acceptable way. And then you just went ahead and did it.
Yeah. And also the other thing that throughout the whole film, I don't know if it was intentional, but they pepper it with a lot of pop culture like snippets. I think you saw my Twitter today. I did a freeze frame of the school classroom. It's really interesting, the set design, just the stuff they had in short. They had a Happy Days lunchbox. There was a bit of wood that said X-Wing fighter on it. And then a little bit later on there is a doll of is it the Pink Panther or Scooby-Doo or something?
Yep.
Yeah, Pink Panther.
There's a Pink Panther doll, yeah.
Right. And also when they go and visit the guy who has the growth on his neck, for the room is very muted kind of like colours, but there is a bright red Coca-Cola can on top of the TV, which is very intentional. I was like, what does that mean? That must mean I'm not clever enough to realise what that means. Cronenberg's put that there to mean something. I'm not sure what.
He's also eating some, to me, unidentifiable junk food, right? It looks like cheese puffs or something. Maybe it's like a Canadian brand.
So this is the scene, by the way, just for the audience. So this guy's name is Jan Hartog, and he's a guy who has fled or left the Psychoplasmics Institute, and he partly because he believes that the institute has caused him to have cancer, and he has this strange growth on his neck, which is unbelievably disgusting. It is so. I was telling Laura, I was like, one thing I love about whenever it's done practically is you see the weight of the thing when you touches it, and it moves and it just responds the way you would expect something growing off your neck to. It's fucking gross. Anyway, but that guy is hilarious. I don't even know who this actor is or what he's done, but it's like there's humor immersed in this film. In this scene because he's such a strange guy. But yeah, and so he's trying to sue Raglan, and so Frank is trying to like see if they could like share legal information because Frank is trying to sue them or potentially sue them as well for custody. And so they have this sort of strange series of interactions. And that guy, we meet him, Jan. He's just rolling around on the ground, and he right when they make him come, and he gets up, and he's just like, you have the cardioids or whatever, your cardiac system, and then you also have your pulmonary. What is he talking about? He's talking about
your lymph nodes.
Your lymph nodes or something?
He says that we have two hearts, one for your blood or something, and one for something else.
That's my heart over there on the floor.
Your heart?
My second heart. I mean, your first heart makes your blood circulate, right? But what about your lymphatic fluids?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, movement, walking, running, fucking, rolling on the floor, anything. Like, people have this whole other system they don't even know about. The lymphatic system. It's just like the blood system with its own style of veins and arteries, but no heart. You have to keep moving to get to circulate. And they've just given me pills. They do that every day. And I've got to move them through the lymphatic system. God damn it. Ah! Pardon my sweat. I take a bath real soon.
I think the guy, his grip on reality is just very paper thin.
Yeah, it
tenuous.
was. Yeah. I think that the humor too in that scene is watching Frank be like, "This guy's not going to be helpful to me." Like it's like the more Looney Tunes he is.
You don't want this guy on the stand.
Frank's just like backing away, and Jan's like, "I want to help you," and stepping closer, and Frank's like trying to get out of the room. He's like, "Never mind."
During that scene, like I was just fascinated by just the throughout this entire movie. I was like, this decor of this entire thing is interesting. So yeah, the Coke, but also he was wearing a very specific Adidas tracksuit, which is it's a design which is actually coming back right now. But I'm weirdly into like things like that. It's a design that people are really sought after right now with this old school Adidas logo. I was freeze framing that. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But he's wearing something that's kind of cool now. But just the decor in his mother-in-law's apartment was weird. It was like that wallpaper, that yellow flowery wallpaper was everywhere. They put it even on the doors as well.
Yeah, you noticed that too.
I was noticing that too. That avocado yellow, green, and mustard yellow that makes me makes me think of like the late 60s, early 70s, right? It's just sort of like frozen in amber, that house. Even down to like, it almost felt like the food in her pantry, because there's all the close-ups of the creature like pushing the food off of the, you get picked images of the boxes and they feel like they're from a decade prior to 79, right? Like they just sort of like, it looks like you're in a different time when you're in that kitchen. Which was kind of like when I went to go visit my grandma. But there are such cool intentional set design choices.
Yeah, I mean, I was noticing in
the
mother-in-law's house, the she's got all these various by the mantle. She's got all these kind of, they're not really, I guess they're statues. They're sort of small. They're like carvings or something. I just remember them thinking like, she just reminds me of that kind of person, that kind of older woman who's very sophisticated. She has jewelry and she's a cultured lady who's probably well traveled, and she's brought back all of these cool things from her travels. I find that just it's so specific and intentional, and it brings out like from your own experience what kind of person she would be, I guess.
Well, or you make some assumptions about the kind of person she'd be, and you might not make the assumption that she'd be an abusive alcoholic mother.
Except the fact that she's
drinking like the whole time she's hanging out with Candy. But if you saw that,
I'll top one up for me as well.
I'm going to refresh my drink. But if you saw that house, right, and then you saw those figurines and you made some assumptions about her being a worldly middle class woman, there's a veneer of upper middle class there that I think we don't often associate with that kind of trauma or that kind of family life.
But it's weird. Like, so is the film saying that that mother doesn't have the same thing going on with her in terms of like this illness, like because she's transferred the abusive nature to her daughter, and her daughter's manifesting that trauma in a certain way. But does that mean that that her mother wasn't abused herself? Because
this is interesting. So maybe it is a bit like The Ring. So maybe it is a little bit like you have to pass on the trauma, or you have to just deal with it yourself somehow, and then it'll just manifest on this weird sort of bodily thing. Maybe it's that.
And like,
I mean, it's an incredibly bleak movie.
Yeah,
I
what a set of choices.
Yeah.
And just even the creatures I created, like I felt sorry for them because it's not their fault, and they have a very small time span to actually live because they have that sac which is what feeds them, like a camel's hump, and once that runs out, then they die, and their only kind of reason for living is to basically kill for Nola. It's strange.
That brings me to the other scene, which I think could be a candidate for my favorite scene, which is the autopsy scene, which he shoots in this kind of, he washes everything in like, what is it, purple or something?
It's like a magenta.
Yeah, magenta wash, which is really sort of an intriguing choice. And then Laura was noting like, why would Frank be in the room when they're doing this? But hey, it's
strange.
Great. Yeah. Love it.
So we get the exposition that we need.
Yeah,
about what
exactly. It's so cool. It's a cool scene. I love just, I read a lot of detective novels, and they always make the coroner, an investigative coroner, just a real weird, like a real creep, well, where they're always like, ooh, it's provocative.
Yeah, that's what, so here's the line. He's like,
there's an external deformity. I mean, apart from the lack of sexual organs. It's extremely subtle and extremely provocative. I wonder if either of you have noticed it.
Has no navel.
No what?
No belly button. The thing has no belly button.
That's right. And that means this creature has never really been born. At least not the way human beings are born. Jesus.
he's just like way too into this.
Yeah, and also the fact he says they don't have a belly button, which means they weren't born or something like that. And you just think, okay, well, this is something you need to reveal. Like, don't keep this information to yourself. This is stuff that can change the world.
Yep.
Like, tell the newspapers that you've discovered a new type of like human. Like, it could be like the missing link or something.
Yeah.
But you never hear that side. It's just, okay, cool. Like, I get on with my day. And that's the thing with Frank. He's so blasé. He's just like, oh, cool, okay. Interesting.
Well, yeah, that's the only scene. I think it's magenta wash. I think because it's the only memory or flashback in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Everything else,
right? Because he's driving.
He's driving, and then in Frank fashion, he's just sort of like got his mouth open and his brow furrowed as he's thinking about it, and he's just like, "That was weird." There's just like a lot of shots of him being like, "Huh." Got the beak mouth. Huh.
The beak mouth with no teeth is an intense. I love that. That's a great little detail. I mean, the other thing that I love about the little creatures is and he does this great wide shot where you see all of the kids in the playground or whatever, and they're all wearing nearly identical, except for their colors, snowsuits. And, I'm a Canadian. I grew up in Canada, and I probably wore a snowsuit like that. And I
think we got evidence. We photographic evidence.
Yeah, photographic evidence.
Sure.
But it was some of these things that in Canada, I remember, like, you would just, because it was so damn cold, right? You'd have to like wear that suit, and then you'd get inside and you'd like literally be taking off your clothes for 5 minutes because you've got 6 layers of boots and suit and things. And
it's the perfect cover for those creatures to just come on in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that they just blend right in. So they're indiscernible.
So one of you need to trick the other one by dressing your kid up as one of these like creatures at night and
Halloween.
We have so many very upsetting Halloween.
We have a number of Halloween ideas. And Jed, if you have other ones, but so a couple that we have are, well, now we're going to add to the mix. Broodchild.
Broodchild.
Yeah, Broodchild's definitely. And then we have Alia, the abomination from Dune. What else have we?
That involves giving our kid a giant knife.
Yeah, we got to give him the Chris knife.
I guess when he's a little bit older, then we could do young Michael Myers, put him in a clown costume, and then give him another knife again.
So our son occasionally will get into the dishwasher, and whenever he's got a choice of which thing to get, he goes for a knife, and so we call it Michael Myers thing.
Dishwashers are like extremely scary, especially when they're like left open. If you see a dishwasher in a horror movie, someone's going to die by falling on a knife that's poking out of a dishwasher. It's like honestly, that's like one of the biggest foreshadowings in a horror movie. Oh, they've they've held on that dishwasher for more than a second, that's going to kill someone a bit
That's
later.
no good.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the other scene that is absolutely, will never leave anyone's mind after they've seen it is the final scene where Frank confronts Nola and she says, "Are you ready for me, Frank? Are you really?" And then she pulls up the smock or whatever she's wearing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a, at this point in the film, you've been watching something and you've thought, I kind of get the sense of what's going on. And then when you see it, you're just like, it's really, I think, wonderful that he withholds so much until that final reveal.
Yeah.
That then it really hits harder than it might have otherwise.
It's weird because that's the one time that all he had to do was remain stoic, and he couldn't do it because if he showed any emotion.
Point.
Yeah, it's the one time it's like, Frank, we really need you to do what you've been doing the entire movie, and he doesn't do it. But
that's exactly right.
Like it's absolutely like gross, like what he sees.
Wild.
But
It's
like
really wild.
it's not only that one sack. There was like multiple like sacks, like of different sizes.
She's got like growths on her chest, almost like udders or something. And then it's gnarly. Yeah,
And she seems to be quite confused why he's so disgusted. It's like, lady, look in the mirror.
I know, but she's been under the spell of Dr. Raglan, who thinks that she's like this remarkable, manifestation of all of his theories. She's the queen bee. She gets all the attention and love, and I think she thinks she's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect too that it's a very natural reaction to having some sort of thing which is unnatural, at least statistically unnatural. To it's a healthy thing to embrace it, to think this is something that makes me unique and different and powerful, and is not a a deformity or that kind of thing. So maybe that's part of her therapy, is coming to love herself and the way she looks, which is, I don't know, maybe I'd like to think it would be nice for me to do that if I ever get an external womb. That's what I would aim for. Acceptance.
But then see how I would respond to your external womb.
Yeah.
I disgust you, Justin.
No. That's it. We're getting divorced. All right.
On that note,
so just to wrap things up, so one way to sort of end this, kind of wrap everything up here, is to think about what movie we would recommend someone if they've seen The Brood, and if they liked The Brood and they were wanting to get into something along similar lines. So Jed, do you have a movie you would recommend to someone who likes The Brood?
I would go for, and I think it was possibly an inspiration for The Brood. I don't know for certain, but maybe some of the iconography. Village of the Damned, the original 1960s Village of the Damned, which is like set in the UK, not the John Carpenter remake, which is set somewhere in America. Just because you have these little weird blonde kids running around killing adults, that very similar to The Brood. And I think there is something scary about uniformity, just everyone thinking the same, and almost like a hive mind, which is kind of what you get in The Brood as well. And it's also just a very good movie, Village of the Damned. It stands up. I watched it recently, and then I also watched Children of the Damned, the sequel, straight away afterwards, and they're really, really good movies. And I am a fan of the John Carpenter remake as well. I think it's really underrated movie.
When did the Carpenter one come out? I haven't seen.
Sometime in the 90s.
Okay, so it's the 90s Carpenter, yeah.
Yeah, like 90, maybe 92, 93 or something.
Okay.
But it's really, really well done, and like scary, and and Christopher Reeve is the lead in it, and Mark Hamill's in it. It's a weird bunch of misfits, but it's it's a really good movie.
Put it on the list.
Okay.
Do you have one, Laura?
This one, I imagine if you've seen The Brood, you've probably seen this one too. But just in case, I was thinking as I keep bringing up my own birth and pregnancy stories, I just think about how horrifying the experience of having a baby inside of you is. I would recommend Rosemary's Baby if you want the female perspective, perhaps a little bit more of Nola's perspective on this. I love that movie, and it has a different resonance for me now that I've had a thing like punching me from the inside. It's an insane experience.
Jed, and one other thing that we always joked about was when Laura was pregnant was we were like, yeah, we're gonna get the Rosemary's Baby bassinet where
you know,
get
with the upside down cross.
Upside down cross on the top.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we didn't follow through with it, but we were thinking about it. We were thinking on it.
Oh, just another one that's in a similar vibe. You reminded me is Alice Lowe's film Prevenge. Have you seen that?
No.
It's on
I was looking at feminist horror movies, and it's all over those lists. Tell me about it.
Oh, it's great. It's about a woman who is compelled to murder by her unborn child, by the fetus. It tells her to murder people, and she is a slave to it because it's inside her, and she has to kill these people. And it's really good. And Alice Lowe stars in it, directed it while she was actually pregnant. So when you see that baby bump, it's real. And I think it's one of the best British horror films there's been for years. There's very few good British horror films of the last 20 years, and that's definitely one of them.
Prevenge. That's also a very cool word. I like that. I like when movies sort of manipulate the sort of the temporal aspect of things, where it's like, I'm gonna get revenge on you before you even did anything to warrant it. My recommendation was, and it's not like my favorite movie or by any means, but it was just a movie I was trying to think of that thematically was linked to The Brood, which is Shane Carruth's Upstream Color, which is a movie where there's this kind of cyclical notion of trauma that manifests itself in a physical form, in the forms of these pigs on this farm, and that ends up binding together these people whose traumas are linked through this sort of weird drug that is sort of grown by the pigs on this farm. Anyway, it's an incredibly weird, surreal movie. I prefer Primer, but that's a Primer poster actually behind us. But
I love Primer,
But Upstream Color though, it's a surreal movie, and Amy Simons is great in it. So that would be my recommendation. And you know what's crazy, Jed, is that our sun is starting to stir. So I think we timed this perfectly. We want to thank you so much for being here with us and sharing all your insights and your vast knowledge of horror.
Thank you for having me. I loved speaking about The Brood. It's such a great movie, and I just love revisiting it as well because I forgot how weird it is, but also brilliant.
And Jed, in addition to Host, which everyone should watch, you want to tell us where we can find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me mostly on Twitter at Jed Shepherd, JedShepherd. Same on Instagram. And that's about it.
Can you tell us what's coming up for you?
Yeah, we've just finished shooting. We're doing 3 Blumhouse movies. We've just finished the first one. So hopefully that will be out soon. It's really cool. Very, very cool.
Hell yeah.
And then we've got 2 more after that. And then we're doing a movie with Sam Raimi, a big horror movie. We've got a woman in prison horror movie with Studio Canal. And we've got some more that we can't. It hasn't been announced yet. But
this is amazing. This is incredible.
Congrats.
Everyone, pay attention to Jed Shepherd because you're going to know this name. He's up and coming. I mean, he's already here because Host is incredible. Go watch Host. It's great. It's so much fun. It's under an hour. Come on, there's no excuse. It's absolutely great.
Runtime is always a part of Justin's pitch for a movie.
Yeah,
especially because I'm always tired. He's always like, it's a tight 82 minutes. And I'm like, all right. And this one's under an hour.
And Host, so we can tell them, so Host is streaming on Shudder right now, right?
Yeah, it's on Shudder, which is accessible on Shudder.com or the Shudder app. Or Amazon. If you have Amazon, it's available on there through the Shudder kind of channel. But it's also available through iTunes and Amazon, all the other places. It came out on DVD and Blu-ray recently, and there's a special edition Blu-ray coming out in a couple of weeks as well, which is really cool. Lots of different extras. It's kind of everywhere.
And there's a VHS.
There's a VHS as well. And also, if you're in Asia, it's coming out in the cinemas there at the moment. In South Korea and Japan, and it's number one. It was number one in Vietnam last week in the cinemas.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So it's
Hell yeah.
everywhere.
Well, that's awesome. We bought it on iTunes. We saw it on Shudder when it came out first, and we just bought it on iTunes, and that's how we got all the special features. And we were like, "This is amazing." We watched all the. It's just great, and you guys don't take our word for it, but honestly, like the women are just, they're all good friends. It's like spending a night with your friends. It really is fun just to like, and I think that's part of what is so rewatchable about it, is that like it's like hanging out with some friends, and the chemistry is great.
And they're the nicest people. Everyone, all the cast, all the crew were just like good friends, and it's it's just a snapshot of like what we kind of do every single day, weirdly, but. Yeah,
you summon a demon, and then it pulls you around on your chair a little bit, and then you got to get rid of that demon. So we are at Cowspod on Twitter. You can find us on the web at cowspod.wordpress.com. The podcast is available everywhere you get your podcasts. Our next episode is Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, with Keith Phipps, who's writing a book on Nick Cage, and so that should be a lot of fun. Wow. We will be digging into the Cage oeuvre, but also the Werner Herzog oeuvre, because the namesake, he's the namesake of this podcast, and we haven't done any Werner Herzog, so that'll be fun.
Stay tuned for iguanas.
Yeah, we're gonna do the iguana stuff. I will mention one other thing, and if you got this far in the episode and you're enjoying it, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps. And also, there's a way to leave us a message if you want to leave a message on our website. You can just go to the website. The instructions are there, and including just suggestions for other movies for us to cover. And we look forward to seeing you next time. All right. Bye.